My name is Emma Kingdon. I'm the director of the Australian Trade Union Institute and Organising and Capacity Building at the Australian Council of Trade Unions, which is the peak union body. When you look at the Australian trade union movement through our density, it's low and it's been declining. But in important ways, it reflects the modern workplace. So one striking example is actually 55% of all union members are actually women. They're in healthcare, in education, in services, and in many other industries. And then when you look at the leadership of our movement, you think of strong women leaders like Sally McManus and Michelle O'Neill, who are the Secretary and President of the Australian Council of Trade Unions. Union membership stands at over 1.5 million workers, and that's actually around 14.5% of the workforce. So overall, it's been declining, but overall, it's been in decline, and that's very similar to the experience of many other countries in the developed world. But unions, win big, and they win big in Australia. A recent example would be through the pandemic. Resistance was being met for a wage subsidy, and it was actually the union movement, who were able to win JobKeeper and JobSeeker in Australia, a wage subsidy. And if that had not been the case, it would have been absolutely devastating. And absolutely, the pandemic has been devastating, but it would have been more so. And in general, I can say that union members earn $350 more than non-union workers still in Australia. When you think of the challenges and changes in the economy and in the labour market, it's radical. It's radical, fast, fundamentally changing the way we operate, which means that we have to fundamentally change the way unions operate and organise to access workers and to unionise workers. And that's even before you even think about advancing the interests of working people. So if you look at the gig economy and the lack of workers' rights in the gig economy, when you look at flatlining wages or the growth in insecure work, 25% of workers in Australia are in insecure work. This is the product of successive right-wing governments giving all the power to bosses and really, really clamping down and introducing reduced rights for workers. So even right now, as we speak, the current government in Australia is attacking working people through legislation. And amongst other things, it's going to make life harder for insecure workers. And when we talk about insecure workers, we're talking about young workers, we're talking about workers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and we're talking about women. And we know what happens to communities in our country if we attack young workers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and women. It's not good. And it's union members and unions, the work of unions, that actually make great strides in these areas. However, unfortunately, successive right-wing governments have really attacked workers' rights. Well, I think that we need to demonstrate our relevance to the modern workforce. Absolutely, unions are relevant, but we need to find new ways to be relevant to modern workforces and also to different types of workers at different stages in their working lives. We need to demonstrate the value of union membership and explore different ways that union membership can be valuable. And we need to make it as easy as possible for workers to join and make it incredibly clear that every worker has a place in their union. There's been extraordinary resilience and resourcefulness that working people and their unions have been able to demonstrate through the pandemic. And unions have found different ways to support and protect and advance workers' rights during the pandemic, whether that's around JobKeeper or wage subsidy, like I spoke to you before, or whether that's introducing, infection control training. There's lots of different ways that Australian unions have been innovating for growth, but I think it's those key areas: relevance, value, and also making it possible for workers to join easily and access their union. That is the best way to respond to these challenges. So one way to look at Australian union membership is that we've been declining. Another way to look at it is that still on any street in Australia, in general, for every 14 houses, there's going to be a union member. That's incredibly powerful to think about your neighbour and your community like that. And actually, we have a community and a workforce that really wants to see a really strong trade union movement. So whilst there's been attacks by opponents, there's actually a real need there for unions to fill that function, an important function in our society. And the Australian trade union movement has always been essential and essential in advancing the interests of working people, whether that's through superannuation, whether that's through Medicare, whether that's through a minimum wage increase every year. Fundamentally, trade unions will always play a central role in our community. However, we need to adapt, and we need to respond to the challenges that workers are currently under in the changing nature of work. And one way that we're doing that is through the establishment of the Australian Trade Union Institute just in 2020, which is basically the training arm of the peak union body in Australia. And we're doing things like having a futures network where unions come together, share the new innovations in the way they organise and they represent working people, new ways of growing, new ways of accessing and communicating with workers. So that's what we're going to continue to need to do: share, collaborate, but also do the role that we've always done in advancing workers' interests, both on a local level, in a workplace level, and as a whole society.